I'm going to try and zip through some slides relatively quickly. I want to talk about the challenges that we face in our industry, which is the backdrop for why I think like vendor-client relationships are difficult these days. Then I want to talk about some of the hope that exists in the exhibition hall right now and in vendor relationships, some of the exciting things that I see there and how we're working with vendors in the way to overcome some of those challenges. And all the way through, what I really would like is feedback and questions. So we've got a pretty small group. So if you're really sure of your question, you think it's helpful, then just shout, right? Just shout. If you're not very sure, you're a little bit timid, then at the bottom of every page there's a little URL. Feel free to type your question in there. And what I'll do is then at the end go look and see which questions have been entered, see which questions have been prioritized, and we'll go from there. So let me talk about why I think, first of all, we've got somewhat impossible jobs these days as insight professionals in organizations. I think it is an impossible job that we've got. And that's because the world is getting ridiculously complicated around us, and there's just no way that we can keep up with it. So if our job is to help organizations to understand audiences, consumers, where they're spending their time, how they're spending their time, and to help organizations connect with consumers and build relationships with consumers, there's just no way that we can do that and really stay on top of it across websites, social networks, apps, and messaging apps as well, which are now bigger than social networks in monthly active users. They're all ridiculously complicated things to understand, different mechanisms and behaviors, different data sets coming into us to understand and analyze and get back. And in the old world of maybe malls and high streets, you could get pretty good understanding of consumers and how they spent their time and where they spent their time. In the new world, there's no way any of us could be an expert in all of the places consumers spend their time. So we've got a somewhat impossible challenge to help our organizations these days. And if you look at this chart, which I found a couple of days ago, I'm deeply in love with it. It's a periodic table of all the different marketing measures available to us. They're all really important. So I zoomed in randomly to different parts on this just to illustrate. I did not choose this, but they're all interesting. So if you zoom in here, cost per point, inquiry rate, cost per something else, frequency. If you look over here at some of the engagement metrics, you've got views and activities and actions and all these different things. And if you look at some of the conversion metrics, also really, really important in our business, you've got media efficiency and revenue. Little things like revenue gets one blob on the page. All of these metrics, or at least many of these metrics, are really, really, really important for your organization. They're different for every single channel. They're measured differently. And it's almost impossible for any one person to have an overview of this, or any one team even. Yeah, and in addition, there isn't any one vendor who can help you with this. But there is hope. Incredibly impossible challenge, but there is hope. And I think that hope can be illustrated by this quote. So from a science fiction writer, I've heard it once already in this conference. I think you'll hear it 2 or 3 more times because it's a really important quote. The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. So the future of how we solve some of these problems really is there. It's in this hall, actually. It's just not spread around to all of our teams yet. So our job is to spread it around. I think the hope comes in 2 forms. Number 1, automation. How do we take relatively simple, repetitive tasks that are taking us and our teams a lot of time, and how do we help them to do that in either an automated or a semi-automated way? So take a look at the Toluna stand and the automated insights that they're demonstrating as one example. There are many others. But automation to free our time up, to stop us doing things that we don't need to spend our time on, and to enable us to go explore some of these new things is absolutely fundamental. The other fundamental piece here is data science or artificial intelligence or machine learning. Comes in different forms for different business problems. It's really key, particularly if you think about that big table of metrics. So for every single metric on that page, there's different activities that you should do to optimize for that metric. But if you were to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions, you can very quickly understand for any given metric the different activities that impact it. In a human way, you can't do that, but machines can do that for you. So again, it comes down to automation, but using machines in a cleverer way. The problem with this, and this is where we get onto vendors, is that not only are these solutions not evenly distributed, they also require a little bit of polishing. They're often not quite ready for prime time. Like, they might work really well in one use case, but yet they don't quite work well for another. They might work well in your business, but not your business. So it's not, for most of these solutions, it's not like you can just go pick a vendor. It requires a little bit more work than that, actually. And that, for me, in terms of vendor relationships, it sometimes seems like a tug of war. Walking around the exhibition hall, I can feel the tugs when anyone sees my name badge. And then after I have a relationship with a vendor, sometimes I decide to automate what they do and do them out of a job or reduce their revenue. Feels a bit like a war. So it does feel like a tug of war, but actually true partnerships with vendors are the solution for me. And we have to put a mechanism around that, because there are so many vendors that we want to work with, so many great ideas out there. They require time and effort to make them work appropriately in our business, of piloting and testing and failing and trying again. A straight up contract with a vendor, with a new vendor in a new area for us, and these areas that are the future, never really works off the bat. So we have a program which is a safe space for us to try new vendors, fail, iterate, learn, and together, for mutual benefit, work out how to solve this problem in a scalable and repeatable way across multiple businesses. So we help the vendor as much as they help us. So is there a lower tolerance for failure these days than there was 10 or 15 years ago? I think that might well be the case. In the old world, though, I think we had a relatively small number of big projects that had to succeed. In the new world, look at that list of metrics. We have to have a ton of different projects. They're not ready for prime time. I actually think my failure rate is too low, because I actually think I need to fail more, because unless you're failing, you're really not trying new things. You're really not pushing the boundaries. So I think there probably is a low tolerance for it, and I think that we all should be failing quite often and learning from those failures and applying it to other projects. But the answers aren't out there yet for the things that we're interested in. So unless we're trying things and failing in a safe space with decent economics around the deal, so that it's not a very expensive failure, then I think we should be failing a lot more. And I think, for us, an equal part of this is tailoring the vendor to work well in our business. An equal part of it is helping the vendor to get their business model right, whether it's contractual terms or test and learn environments or adapting their charts and reports and processes so that they can find success in the wider industry. So I think it's genuinely two-way. Because only by standing on the shoulders of other people and vendors in particular in this area can we hope to succeed. It used to be that we could build things in-house, build capabilities in-house, but I not only can't afford the best machine learning, artificial intelligence experts in the world, it would be a tragic waste if I were to hire them when they could be solving the problem over here for everybody instead of just me. So I can't afford them, but I don't want them. I want solutions that I'm paying a fraction of the cost for and that are benefiting lots of people rather than building it myself. So I found myself almost never building solutions these days and instead partnering, whereas 10 years ago, it was almost entirely for me build them in-house rather than partner. So I think, whereas the old world for me, just a few years ago, was the big name research agencies, the big name data sources, and things like surveys. Just a few years ago, they were the core of how I delivered insight to my businesses. That's all changed now. It's all changed. So anything on the left-hand side for me, the question is, how do I automate or semi-automate it? How do I reduce the amount of time I spend on it? It's still really important. Brand tracker is still really important to us. But I want to spend less and less and less time on my brand tracker and have it more and more and more automated so that I can free up time for where all the value is coming now. And our lead source of insight across most projects is not the brand tracker anymore. It's these free data sources that are available of how people spend their time, cookie data, social media data, but combined with, and this is the key, combined with really smart data science to tease out the insight from it, because just looking at the numbers doesn't tell you anything. But if you apply really, really clever data science on top of those data sources, again, for me, that is now the lead source of data for example, who is the audience for my TV show. It's not Nielsen anymore. It's social media analytics in a really smart way, and that's game-changing. So I think we should move on to a discussion now, but my point being, first, like, our job is ridiculously complicated. We can't hope to achieve it using old methods and existing ways of working. There are answers out there. There really are. They're here in the room. They're not often not quite ready for prime time and require a decent amount of work to get them there, which for me is not a tug of war, it's a genuine partnership. And yeah, and I've seen it in my business that these new tools become the lead go-to first place we go. And old tools are still there, we still need them, but they're in the background. They're lower cost and they're much more automated. So tug of war, yes, but partnership is actually the real answer. And underneath that tug of war, if you can work out what the partnership model looks like, for me, that's the key answer. So, questions and discussion. Why don't you take the mic and...
Thanks, David. I actually came from the client side and moved into the vendor side about 3 months ago, because the vendor I joined was solving a problem I had as an insights professional. But the problem that I see is not as much in the vendor versus client, is internally within teams. They're still too siloed. So I have clients now that are, they're great. They have completely automated their process and are doing stuff in a much more efficient way. The rest of the 15 people in their team are still not doing it. So how do you break those silos internally so, the entire organization can benefit from it?
So I think silos inside the research team and inside organizations are a huge problem. And I think there's another problem that goes with that as well, which is people getting stuck in a rut of behavior. And, and for me, the recent project we did to understand audiences for one of our big brands was a great example of this. So we wanted to do an audience segmentation for actually 3 or 4 of our big brands, starting with BBC Earth. And in the old world, like, my go-to expertise that I'm really good at and I've done to great effect is online surveys, SPSS segmentations. Honestly, they're really, really good. But I scratched my head, and that's not what we did. We used Affinio, in this case, using Twitter analytics, and that was our lead. But, it was really hard for me to come to that view. And luckily, I'm not precious about how I spend my time. But, my skill I'm really good at was totally outdated and not relevant in the new world. And I put it to one side and I embraced the new technology. And I think that was quite hard for some, I'm okay to do that. I can do multiple things. For other people in my team or in other research teams, that's a really hard thing for them to do. But I think that's one really important lesson to help break down silos and stop getting stuck in a rut. And the other, I think, that research teams have a problem with is trusting or enabling the business to help themselves. There's loads of solutions here, like civic science, for example, which are perfect to give to your marketing teams. It will solve loads of their day-to-day problems without having to go to the research team and navigate the silos of the research team. But research teams are typically scared of entrusting and empowering their businesses. No. Entrust them and empower them. They can do loads of things themselves, and you can then focus on the stuff that's really, really, really important without getting bogged down in all the day-to-day. So I think silos, yes, but also protectionism and fear of change is also making that problem worse.
I'm just doing this to get you off the hook. It's not so much a question as just a comment, and I agree with everything you just said. I think the vendor community is getting a lot more sophisticated in what they're bringing to the client community. And the fear on the client side is job security. And so how do we work better together to bring the vendor up alongside us so that we're a partnership and go forward as a partnership without a team that's used to doing surveys and SPSS feeling like our management is going to look at the team and say, well, why don't we just hire all this out? Because to be completely frank, there are lots of things that are being hired out. And we are seeing, I don't know about you guys, but the tenure at Hallmark is about 20 years. And to see people losing their jobs occasionally in different areas, IT, different places like that, that are being outsourced, makes you kind of twitchy about, do I bring in somebody prettier than me, right? So if you're going to be prettier, you got to also be really huge on the partnership side so that we can help each other succeed and we can raise it together. And so not so much a question, just kind of a reality check in terms of what we're facing.
I would elaborate, by the way, I think the atmosphere is you can just go whenever you want. So if you want to just take off, that's fine. And then maybe do one more question if there is one, and then we'll wrap this up as well. But feel free to run if you need to. I won't be offended. I would elaborate on that as well. And then one more question. Yay! I would elaborate on that to say, like, I think our value add as insight teams inside an organization is the integration of capabilities with business needs. And only we can understand what's really going on in the business and what's really going on in insight capabilities and how they match and where they match. And if all we do is route the right project team to the right vendor, if all we did was that, then frankly that would still be value add. And in fact, it's way more difficult to that because tools are not ready for prime time. And each vendor plays one role in that ecosystem. But think back to that diagram of all the different KPIs. No one vendor looks at all of those, but that's our job to look at all of those or to balance across them. So I would say, like, bring vendors in for particular problems, encourage that, be a router that helps get the right traffic to the right place. Only we can map across that. And if any one vendor does actually cover the entire spectrum of available tools and capabilities, well, that's fine, but that is just basically an outsourced insight department. It doesn't exist now, but that is an option. So yeah, I'm not worried about that because the world's changing so frequently that, yeah, only we can balance that.
Hi there. I was just going to jump onto what you were saying. I work at an insurance company, and all of a sudden, people I was trying to convince for years are researchers. So you have IT people, user experience people, marketing people going off and doing their own research. And so what I'm getting from what you're saying is there's two implications, or two sides. In my role, it means I need to be a leader. I need to take charge to help bring this all together and synthesize it and understand the business strategy so that I can apply research accordingly and bring it to the right people if you're a vendor. And then on the vendor side, I think the implication is you can really help me stay relevant. So instead of pushing your solution, really taking the time to build that relationship, understanding the challenges overall at the company for really getting the most value out of info.
Yeah, so be a leader in your business across all of the business challenges and across all the vendors and help them work together. But on a vendor side, yeah, help the vendors to be very efficient and focused on what they can help with and what they can't help with, so that they're used in the right way in the right projects and the right meetings, and yeah, join that together.
You'll have to hold it for me. What question should we have asked of you that we haven't?
Okay, what questions should you have asked but you haven't? You should have asked what the implication of this is on budgets and headcount. So the implication of this on budgets and headcount is terrible. Every time I meet a new vendor, almost every time I meet a new vendor, it's an extra project. Even if it becomes the headline data tool, like Affinio is our headline data tool for who is our audience. Brand Tracker got demoted. But I can't not do the brand tracker. I still have to do it. So it's even though it's not expensive, it's incremental cost. So most of every new website or social media or messaging app that we have to measure or monitor is somehow an incremental cost to us. So massive increase in the number of tools and capabilities that we have that we need to manage. Significant increase in cost, even though things are getting cheaper all the time. And each person in my team is spread across so many different tools and capabilities and lines of business that you wouldn't believe. So organizationally, headcount-wise and staff cost-wise, this is a nightmare. But I think it's the only option. It's the world we live in, I think. Seems like a natural break point. I'm staying if you want to talk more. Thank you very much. Nice experimental format.